Two-person crew missileers underground behind these double-layered blast doors aren't allowed to be armed, and these officers don't even receive armed escorts when moving sensitive materials between the site and the base. But the security forces above ground are heavily armed to the teeth, dare anyone to try temper with America's most powerful political weapons. What you're about to see is every weapon the U.S. Air Force security forces have to defend more than 20 million acres of nuclear missile fields across America. Starting with the controversial Sig Sauer M18 pistol with some questionable safety problems. But these are brand new 9mm handguns that replace the age-old Beretta M9, and they are now in the field for every Air Force Security Forces member. However, just after a few months upon its official adoption, the Air Force Global Strike Command actually had to pause the use after an airman was fatally shot by the M18 with earlier report of it being an accidental discharge. And somehow, the gun just went off and killed the person dismounting the holster while the gun was still in the holster. But later the investigation confirmed that it was actually a manslaughter case, and the weapon was proven safe after a thorough wing-wide inspection. Later, the higher-up people in charge reapproved the gun back to official use, showing confidence in the weapon to be safe. The M18 is also the official U.S. military optic ready sidearm for other branches that can fit many different hand sizes, especially for female service members. The next is the old-school M4 service rifle. While the Army wants to replace it with the brand-new XM7, but these are still in action across all three missile wings. But most of these rifles have the most basic setups. Most of them have the ACOG 4-power prism scopes that provides airmen long-range capabilities. Some are mounted with aimpoint red dots, foregrips, and some PEC-15s with visible and infrared laser. Since the nuclear deterrence mission goes on 24/7 and it never stops, helmet-mounted night vision along with these PEC-15s enable nighttime operations so they can illuminate and signal tactical movement at night. In addition, when security ramps up during wing-wide exercises or active open launcher maintenance operation, the Air Force also has heavier caliber weapons to fill these defensive positions. During busy days involving high-risk maintenance such as warhead swap, warhead removal, or removal of any critical code component of the missile back to base, the security protocol requires a specific number of people with specific weapon types to be in place before the launcher door even opens. The first is the M249 SAW. It's a belt-fed machine gun that every service branch has, and it's chambered in 5.56 mixed with tracer rounds in the field, and it can fire at 700 to 850 rounds per minute to provide area suppression in those missile sites that are all isolated within a fenced area, spread out across open terrain, and some are literally built next to a public road, and anyone could just walk up to it. But if it's a case of a deliberate armed attack, with the full intent to break into the launch tube, the ability to put sustained fire into an area becomes more important to keep the situation contained and prevent access to the facility, which is already extremely difficult enough, even if the Air Force is to go rogue. Just the access to the launcher tube requires 2 sets of secret combination codes to get into one of the 450 launchers across the country, and each of them is different, and they change every year. These split control protocol ensures neither the missileers nor the enlisted maintenance crew have all the information, but that will be another video explaining all the security systems in the ICBMs. But back to the SAW's suppressive fire capability, which basically lets a defender essentially freeze movement in a direction where a threat might approach. And if someone tries to move across open ground toward a launch facility or along an access road, a belt-fed automatic weapon firing continuously makes that movement extremely difficult. And even if the rounds aren't landing directly on a target, the volume of fire forces anyone outside the perimeter to keep their heads down and slow their advance. The prolonged area denial is critical in missile field security because tactical response forces often have to travel long distances between sites. And the same thing for the belt-fed 762 M240 Bravo. And they provide heavy suppressive fire for launcher facility defense as well as for the missile alert facility. They can either be mounted on armored vehicles, helicopters, or be stationary. When it comes to long-range scout and vehicle denial, the Tactical Rapid Response Team also has the .50 caliber Barrett, fills a very different role in missile field security than other smaller caliber weapons. These TRF teams can be deployed very quickly via helicopter and respond before a threat can escalate. They can observe large areas quickly and insert wherever vehicles cannot reach fast enough. A rifle like the Barrett gives security forces the ability to observe and conduct vehicle interdiction because missile sites are vulnerable to fast-moving approaches disguised in civilian vehicles along rural roads. It creates a buffer zone around the facility where approaching vehicles can be stopped or deterred well before they reach a fence line or gate. In that sense, the Barrett extends the defensive perimeter outward without needing more personnel on the ground. When it comes to missile alert and launch facilities defense, the U.S. military has thought about everything that could happen, even though it's unlikely to see heavy enemy threats in places like Montana, North Dakota, and 3 other U.S. states that host these Minuteman III missile sites. If, and only if, bullets can't deliver enough firepower, the next up will be the 203 grenade launcher, and not all security forces M4 have them attached, but dedicated grenadiers can saturate an area wherever incoming threats are coming from. Some squads also have the M320. These are lightweight, single-tube launchers that doesn't have to be attached to the rifle, and they can be easily deployed to fire explosives and smoke if they ever need to provide additional support or clearing a missile alert facility. If a heavy attack were ever directed at launch facilities, missile alert facilities, or the main support base, the Mark 1940mm grenade launcher would create distance between defenders and a threat. And these launchers are typically positioned in overwatch roles or used for area denial response during high-security activities such as open launcher maintenance or warhead transport operations. If more firepower is needed, it could fire at a rate of roughly up to 375 rounds per minute and engage targets at long standoff distances, reaching up to about 2,200 meters. The round it fires is a self-contained explosive projectile roughly the size of a small soda can, and upon impact, it detonates and scatters metal fragments outward. In a defensive scenario, the most common rounds would likely be high-explosive dual-purpose or high-explosive fragmentation grenades that are filled with explosive material and a nose fuse that triggers detonation as soon as the grenade strikes a surface, severely incapacitate any armored attackers. At a basic level, the Mark 19 fills the gap between machine guns and indirect explosive weapons, and it's a force multiplier. Heavy weapons and perimeter defenses in missile fields were designed to stop ground threats since the Cold War, but the increasing threat of small aerial drones that could easily fly over fences is a huge problem. In a moment like that, security forces would use the drone defender's radio frequency energy to temper and override the drone's onboard control and bring it down. Most commercial drones would lose their connection and either hover or force them to land. It works at relatively close distances, roughly up to a kilometer, depending on conditions. And ideally, the drone wouldn't be a surprise in the first place. RF detection sensors and base defense monitoring systems are meant to spot and track drones early. And this adds a quiet electronic layer of protection above the missile field that simply didn't exist when these security systems were first designed back in the 60s. While many believed the Minuteman III weapon system is too old and too outdated, but the U.S. military has been surgically upgrading these systems over the years, and it won't be the last. And you can watch this one to see every land-based ICBM replacement since the Cold War.